But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win. We choose to go to the moon.
All right, everyone, how's it going today? Welcome to the 39th episode of World Blockchain Roundtable. Hosts for today are Dave from din.social.
Hello.
Jay from Mirror Vision, Mind Your Biz, Satoshi Sean, entrepreneur and friend to everyone, and I'm Joe, architect, founder of Dragonchain. Greg, in a surprise, cannot join us live today. He may pop into the comments on YouTube if he has service. He's driving as he's on his way to ETH Denver. So if you are going to be on the be on the lookout for him. Say hi, right? Quick update on the WBRT layer ownership tokens distribution from last week's episode. Each host from last week will get 133 lot, and every topic contributor 41 lot. We got through a lot of questions, I guess. These ownership tokens come with perpetual passive income, free edits, and other things inside of the layer, and governance votes, which is the most important thing. Speaking of which, the theme selection for next month, March, is up for the governance vote right now. If you can, please do. If you have participated in the past and have WBRT tokens, please do go in there and vote and get the topic that you want next month added. And let's see here. If your theme is selected for one of the shows, also you will now get lot also for that show. So it'll be a pretty cool thing. The theme of this week is mining. So we can cover current events first, and then we can cover anything around the topic itself, mining. And I think everybody knows what mining is. Does anyone want to start with anything on either current events or?
I haven't been paying a lot of attention, but one of the current events that does relate to mining is just like the geopolitical position on mining itself, and which countries are allowing it just outright and which ones are, I think like Russia said that utilities can use excess power to mine it, and that's where they're drawing the line, stuff like that. I don't know if anybody has opinions or knows more about that than I do, but I think it's interesting to see, things like El Salvador mining with volcanoes and concepts like that, which obviously is today's topic anyways. So does anybody have any opinions on that? I'd love to talk about it, because I haven't talked to like humans face to face about it, just typing on the internet.
Yeah, sure. Well, hey, instead of angry typing, why don't we angry video conference instead on this topic? Seems like
man.
Eventually there's a massive rift in opinions between like the pro ESG crowd and then everyone who's like, wait, just let innovation happen, and right. But yeah, just kind of riffing off what you already mentioned there for the news cycle. As far as there being any kind of a development in any former Eastern Bloc country, whether it's Mother Russia or it's any other country with a very low cost basis for power, and possibly just a little bit more lax regulatory environment towards exploring different energy sources for mining, I think it's a great thing. And I think that it should be the high sign for the developed nations of the West, specifically Canada and the US in particular, right? We can capture a lot more hash rate here if regulators kind of get the memo that a bit like that clip that you played at the beginning, we're actually in a secret race against the former Eastern Bloc countries. Whether we acknowledge it or not, we are trying to build up hash rate in a new push for primacy in a new blockchain economy. So
I'm glad you
yeah,
said that, because I think that even if, like you said, like even if you believe it or not, that's what's happening. But even if you don't believe it, because I always like to assume that I'm wrong about stuff and see if it still makes sense, even if I'm wrong. And so, like, even if you don't believe that, it still makes sense to hedge against being wrong. You know what I mean? If there's new rails and there's new international, it's really a new environment that just kind of like popped into existence, and now everybody has to figure out what the implications are that from that. And I think that even if you think it's a nothing burger, that national security wise, you should still hedge against, okay, maybe this is something we should keep in mind for the future of our nation and that kind of thing. And a lot of nations are at least looking at it that way, I think.
yeah, absolutely. I mentioned on a show recently that I guess spoke on this topic of ESG versus well, highly restrictive uh, regulatory environments with regards to mining versus kind of what is possible, right? Because regulation, the fact that something is legal doesn't make it moral or ethical, right? And the fact that something is moral or ethical doesn't make it impossible to do the opposite. We have this broad spectrum of possibilities, and especially when it comes to technology, and especially within mining. You can have an operation geographically set up on one side of the world, and then you can have the hash rate completely plundered, completely pirated by network specialists who know how to intercept the hash rate or know how to infiltrate the local network of that operation. So yeah, if we don't have regulators on our side here in the United States, it doesn't matter that the mining facilities are whatever capturing natural gas flaring operations or helping us to completely innovate in the energy exploration sector. If we don't have regulators on our side to do whatever it takes to secure it, and then vice versa. The fact that, or rather, on the flip side of things, the fact that we believe that mining hash rate has left China doesn't necessarily make it so. We're not sure what's happening there
Right.
because, in terms of the internet traffic, it could very much look like it's coming from somewhere else, and we just wouldn't know.
That's, I hadn't thought about this, but you brought up, shit, what did you bring up? We're
Well,
talking about security, and I lost it. I do this sometime. Sorry about that. It was such a good point. I'll come back to it. I'm sorry. Pass.
well, it is interesting both the security side of that and the fact that you don't know where it is and how. By the way, I mean half the time I think the ESG component is typically just a convenient argument for certain people. So it's always this, because it's been made the argument that Bitcoin is actually very efficient for what it does in energy, right? Compared to the banking system, as an example, and that point can definitely be made. And the other side of it is, frankly, it doesn't matter. It's what humans choose to do with this energy. And you think about it, there's a lot of lost energy. That this is a really powerful, efficient way to capture what otherwise might be lost that isn't used. You have energy there. It. I was always surprised that the nuclear power plants didn't just have that as an aside. No, we're going to also mine crypto on the side. Whether it's
Instead of just
a
wasting the
separate,
excess power.
yeah,
and,
it
put
just
to
makes
use.
sense, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I
yeah.
know what
Some
I
of the
was gonna
smartest
say.
that.
You were talking about security, and I hadn't thought about the implications of infiltrating networks and things like that. We think about things like 51% attacks as, okay, as long as this pool doesn't have too much hash power on it and stuff like that, assuming that the pool controls their pool, and assuming that the operators of the pool control their pool. And
Right on.
that's not always, that could maybe not be the case. If you have somebody who infiltrates 2-5 different pools and then waits, times it outright and controls their pools, by the time power is wrangled back, the damage will have been done. So that is an attack vector I hadn't even really put enough thought to. But yeah,
Yeah, it only
yeah.
it only takes about an hour. It only takes about an hour to get enough confirmations, at least on Bitcoin, Bitcoin's blockchain, to get enough confirmations to fool pretty much everybody who's using standard best practices.
Interesting.
Those
Yeah.
yeah, those roughly roughly 6 confirmations on Bitcoin, and most people will just presume that things are okay. They wouldn't really second guess it until the damage is done.
wow.
Cool. Interesting. But
I
yeah,
think
Joe,
it's
there's so
more
much
last
wasted
week or the week
energy.
before, but we had a lot of lawmakers have kind of come out of the woodwork, and they're taking it more seriously. But you also can see kind of those lines being drawn. Who's on, and it's not who's on the side of crypto. It's more who's on the side of technological innovation and keeping it in the United States, which honestly I've thought that's going to be it. That's finally going to be what makes things take off. Is that war? Is that we have to keep this. We can't let China or Russia or whoever get ahead of us. It's I mean, that's been how things have been for mostly since the country's been started. And I think we're starting to see that now. And I think that's more just a verbiage that people have kind of wised up and started using. That we can't lose this technology. We can't lose this race.
Yeah.
And kind of putting it out there. This is a new race. And I think that's something that those people that Greg likes to say are a lot smarter than I think they are, but that they actually get. They don't need to understand what it is. They don't need to understand anything except for, they want it and they can beat us. We have to beat them. Whatever it is.
The funny thing about that is, we tend to make the liberty argument. Like say, whenever we would talk to senators or congressmen in the past, way back when they were trying to say they were going to ban Bitcoin, not understanding it and everything else, we would make the argument that this is an ability to open up markets. So it's a pro-business, pro-employment argument that America can have. That you have. It's like the new internet. In their eyes, it's an easy thing to explain. It's trillions of potential dollars that will be in your district versus in China or in Europe, right? Or somewhere else in Asia. And so that
Joe, I'm sorry to interrupt there.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but to your point, as far as it being a simple thing to explain, I think you're right. If we have advocates that are framing it correctly. Yeah, because politicians make a career out of making things more complicated than they need to be.
Yeah, I tell you, I talked to a congressman, and we told him here are the things you can do with it, and they were all understandable things generally, but it was not until I said hundreds of thousands of jobs and trillions of dollars that you will lose if you guys don't figure this out and get it fixed, and everyone in the room started scratching on it. It was like, you could tell. It was like, okay, that was something that was important. And the other thing that we've never attached is because, frankly, we didn't have the argument because China controlled so much of the Bitcoin mining. So we didn't have the ability. But it's almost like you need a threat if it's a national security issue. Imagine if, I think the one thing that could hedge against the lobbyists against us, which are the bankers and the VCs and various other things in this pursuit, is if you could get the military industrial complex behind it and realize, holy crap, if we don't do this, I mean, because it literally is a threat to national security when you're talking about the dollar and things like that. So
depending on who you talk to, it's a threat to the military industrial complex itself. If you're able to, the argument for projecting hash power and electricity instead of projecting violence and force to enforce property rights, right? Instead of enforcing property rights with violence, enforce it with electricity. That sort of line.
Well, that's the argument to the people, I think, because that's if you don't want war, we need to fix our economic fundamentals, because that's what's going to lead to war. So
yeah, I think the other thing that's an argument to the people is people love to bandwagon, especially like mom and pop investors, right? Retail investors, generally speaking, that have their investments managed by the sort of like, we'll say mid-scale brokerages and stuff. They're always looking at I got a fun parlor trick here. They're looking at these guys. They're looking at these guys, right? Yeah, the Warren Buffetts of the world that are like, I'm pro Bitcoin now. I got to do his voice better, but the thing is, like, they're risk off. Most retail is risk off, and so them showing an interest, like you're saying, so bottom up, them showing an interest, top down, telling our elected officials, like, this is America's interest vis-a-vis the military industrial complex, and then like Dense Social is saying, or Distance is saying, then getting that middle ground where it's like you got swing voters who are like very much interested in certain topics, saying, look, you might not be interested in Bitcoin as financially or technologically, but what about a force for social good? And you start to lay out all the ways it can be used for social good. such as slowly dismantling that military-industrial complex, or something that came up recently in another show. I don't know if Satoshi Shon. I think it was one that we did with Rice. But I mean, imagine this: another huge evil in the United States is our massive reliance on the prison industrial complex. Private prisons they should be illegal. It's unbelievable. It's unconscionable the percentage of our population that is incarcerated.
It's really weird how we're like the only country that has a for-profit prison system, and we also have the largest.
So imagine
it didn't add up, does it? It's weird.
Well,
so imagine this: Bitcoin can't fix this. I apologize. I'll just express this last bit of the idea. Bitcoin can fix this in that prison wages for inmates are pennies on the dollar. It is the new version of slave labor. This is how, by the way, I won't race bait here, but this is actually how brown person slavery exists in this country still, is the disproportionate number of nonviolent crimes.
Version,
yeah, the new version, the disproportionate number of nonviolent crimes committed by people of color that result in incarceration in federal penitentiaries. But the point is, those wages paid to inmates are fractions of what the fair market value of labor is. Imagine if instead of being paid like fiat pennies, they were even just paid in Satoshis, paid the exact same amount, right? Almost nothing, but in Satoshis. So by the time their sentence is carried out, they actually have something approximating the real world value of that labor.
Can you imagine having
years of dollar cost averaging?
Yeah. Can you imagine having some sort of financial cushion to build a new life on when you got out of prison? You know, holy cow, what a concept.
Yeah.
But
we might see
I think about that every time, and honestly, I'm in Florida, and I can go down to the marijuana store, and I can buy cannabis, right? That's regulated by the state and tax and all of that stuff. And I go in there and I do that, and I think, there's people in prison for doing this right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I remember when Ohio got rid of, or I'm sorry, other way around. You were talking about the for-profit prisons. There's cases where the state has guaranteed like an 80% capacity of the prisons. Like, we guarantee we'll keep enough people in prison for it to be profitable for you, and that's in the deal of going private, to where the state is now promising we will keep enough people locked up for this to turn a profit for you.
It'd be
that whole system is crazy.
Balance came out of the
it's not every state, but it has happened.
It's like,
we're going to go off on a tangent like we do when we start off on this stuff. But I wanted to, so one more thing on that. There's a whole nother industry that's connected to that has nothing to do with incarcerated people. And that's that their families. You want to make a phone call, it's like, $5 a minute. It's like having a cell phone in the 80s. It's crazy. Also, I don't understand how, in a time of disaster in Florida, I remember years and years ago, I was really young, but the National Guard came out. It was during like an old, huge hurricane. I remember like Miami Sound Machine was doing a concert for it. So it was old. But the governor said that the National Guard will kill you if you try to gouge people on prices, or if you hoard. It was shocking to me that they said that they will kill you in this crisis if you try to steal gas or do any of that stuff. It was immediate. But if you are in jail, if you want to buy a pack of ramen that's 10 cents, it'll be like $1.50 or $2 that your family has to pay. Anything is the price. You're at your most vulnerable. You have no job because you've lost it usually, and you have to pay outrageous prices for anything. I mean, I can't understand how that's illegal. I can't understand how they could say they're going to keep a certain amount of people locked up. That is just such a profound example of how messed up, not just that system, but the fact that system's allowed to go on shows how flawed the entire system really is.
Yep.
And I think it's a big deal that Warren Buffett changed his mind and bought billion or whatever dollars worth of Bitcoin, because I think that's like one of the final nails in the coffin. Like, we're here.
Yeah, he's at that age though where it's literally YOLO, right? He's not even buying fruit that isn't ripe yet these days, man. He's got to figure out what to do with the remaining breaths he has left. So good on him for making one last really smart decision.
For me, you know how I am. That's an potential indicator that they feel they have it controlled enough to go ahead and start buying it and telling people they're buying it.
Being public about it, yeah.
Can of worms with all the other crypto too. But anyway, so you're gonna go to the questions, you guys? Good.
I'm down.
Yeah, let's go. All right. So to refresh. Let me see. I think we have a top question in there. Perfect. So thanks everybody for asking and providing topics. Jacob Wayne, question: what is the biggest security threat to mining at home with a network that is used by others? Is there a simple solution? If everyone in your household uses the same network for the internet, it probably depends too if you're in an apartment building or if you're stealing Wi-Fi or anything like that and doing mining. There's different risks. But what do you guys think?
It's a valid concern. Like I know, I've thought about this even with networks that are not highly active yet, but I assume they're going to be attacked in the future, even if it's just an investor trying to figure out if it'll fall over if it gets attacked. You got to think about, like, there's valid reasons to attack a network too, to see if this blockchain thing's really going to stand up. So what I do is I segregate my IP space, but basically what that means is I just have, logically, I have two networks at home, because I do, like behind me I have a bunch of test rigs up trying to figure out which ones work better. But I've got Dragonchain nodes on there. I've got some mining going on for different networks like Monero and Oxen and things like that. I don't have a Lightning node on there, but there's a lot of but I used to. But there's a lot of things that concern me about that. You could. It depends on, here's what it depends on. It depends on what the requirements of the network is that you're mining on, because some of them require you to have an IP address that doesn't change, while others will allow you to have a dynamic address, and you can get something like DDNS services and things like that, and you can use that. Some networks don't require you to be reachable at all, and it dials out, some proof of stake, things like that. So I guess it depends on what you're doing, but if you want to just assume the worst, which is, a safer way to do it than just ignoring it, I would say either figure out how to put your mining stuff on like a different network, maybe even get a second home internet account just for that with a different IP address, or if you have a business internet service, if you're doing it from home, they'll usually give you a bunch of different IP addresses with that. And then in your router, you can say, anything that comes in on this IP address is dangerous, so keep it over here. And then, kind of like, I don't know, software, I guess, settings, research. Off the top of my head, that's what I think about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna second that. There's some things you can do to segment whatever the home network is, and just the various steps, without duplicating any of the value added content that Distant just gave, the advice he just gave you there. Look into like VPN routers. There's some really solid ones, and not every VPN is created equally. First off, just know that, and I'm going to dead name some that you should just flat out avoid. Nord, Express, Surfshark, anything that has a heavy marketing budget to try to get your attention. Probably not all that safe to keep your docs with them in their database, or to use like very easily purchased credentials, regardless if they tell you that it's got unlimited bandwidth or unlimited nodes that you can use with a given license. Just be a little more picky when you are using a VPN, if you think you have to use a VPN for at-home mining. But then also you can have VPN routers that are pre-flashed if you're not inclined to flash like whatever Tomato or DDWRT onto a router that will accept that, or set up a pfSense node for yourself. This is stuff that like will take the science experiment, the IT experiment of going into mining, and will apply an exponential learning curve for you. You will hit a wall. So look for pre-flashed routers. I think the rest of the panel here may have some recommendations on stuff like that, but like they're not impossible to find, I'll put it that way, and they're not going to break the bank. So certainly not compared to like GPUs that you're adding to a GPU rig right now. You're looking at a fraction of the cost, but it's cheap insurance.
I grew up with like just scavenging for stuff, and so what I love doing. Here's what I would do to spend almost no money, is to go to Goodwill or some thrift shop and find even like one of those old Linksys routers and flash DDWRT on it. Unless you're doing something heavy, high bandwidth, those will still handle it. You know what I mean? It'll be $5, and you can find a guide on the internet, step by step. Here's how you replace the firmware on it with something that's robust and offers some enterprise grade features.
And it's a good learning experience. I mean, it's like when you
learn a
first
lot.
do that,
Yeah.
it's very rewarding. You feel like, holy crap, it's a cool thing anyway. And
Yep.
I remember some of that firmware is frankly amazing because you can boost the power on your, you can do things that, even if you aren't going to do it for the security reason, it's just cool stuff, right? So it's really neat.
Yeah. Well, like Joe's saying, imagine turning an old Wi-Fi router into basically like your own personal WiMAX network, where you can get a half mile away from home and still have your own signal. Like these aren't just anecdotes. Like we all know somebody who's done it.
Every time I learn something, I think about, what could I do? I like to so there's a pine tree out front that I've got marked to put up a mesh node, a Wi-Fi node in, so that I can walk my dog and stay on Wi-Fi, that kind of thing. So yeah, you get into learning about like, if I can do this, then I can do that.
That's fun.
pfSense is great. I love pfSense. You mentioned that one. With that, if you that's what I use. I built just a regular computer and then put pfSense on it. And that is able to handle things like, gigabit speeds, NAT translation. And also, you can take multiple inputs. And so you can do failover. If you want to do reliability and uptime and things like that, start adding, an battery backup and a failover. I even have Starlink on order if I can ever get my dish, just so that if there's a hurricane, or maybe not a hurricane, but if something happens and the coax goes down, then I'll have another link or something like that. You know what I mean? So
can I ask,
bring into this, because mining that people don't know about, because honestly, it's really, the average person hasn't really made much money from mining for the past few years. You have to be really focused. You can't be casual. And I
disagree, Sean. I disagree. No, you and I talked about this 4 months ago, bro, and I told you how much you missed out on. It's been the absolute gravy train the last year or two.
You have to catch certain things. You can't go on eBay, spend $150, and then you're making money. Okay, which is what a lot of people want to do. But what Joe was talking about, the coolest thing is when you get into mining and you start doing things you didn't think were possible. Things only like those people could do, which you guys are those people. I know I'm the idiot here, but it's really cool when you realize that you have the ability to do these things, because you would never try them, except for that. Like you're talking about, the security thing. You would never try that except by design, except by losing trust in other people to do it for you. And then you kind of take things into your own hands, and then you're shocked at the things that you can accomplish and you can do. And it is one of the most rewarding things ever. Plus that part of just being part of the network, and being a miner. It's really cool. That's one thing I don't understand about maximalists and all, because you get this really, really huge sense of community when you're part of it. It's like, you're a Bitcoiner, you buy Bitcoin, you mine. No, don't worry about it. I got you, man. I'll take care of it for you. It's really cool, but that's something that most people don't think about or can talk about.
Well, can I bring into the question of, because there's the one thing where I haven't mined anything of any significance since probably 2012, 2013, and even then I was just hobbyist. I wasn't like trying to set up a giant rig or anything like that. I just wanted to know more about it, about some little devices and stuff, and I still have a couple of them. And that one of the interesting things for me, at least, was even if somebody got into my network, it's not that the mined Bitcoin is in cold. It was a beautiful thing. It's like, I don't have to worry about them pulling that. So that's one very important thing that people should understand. And probably different things on some networks because I don't know much about any of the staking systems with the miners as much and how the operation side of it. But the thing that was most important for security, at least when I was doing it, was not necessarily someone getting to my network and trying to steal the little, bits that I'm pulling in a pooled mining setup. The thing that most concerned me is that the internet provider, that there were threats back in the day, especially when you had who was it? Was it Comcast or was it Time Warner that was actually intercepting? If you'd gone past your threshold of data for the month, they literally were intercepting web pages, and it was a question if it was legal.
They were injecting
against
messages to you.
Yeah,
right?
they were putting people in prison for long sentences for doing something similar if you were an individual. But this big company was throwing messages into your web sites that you were downloading illegally, and that when they were to see, much like a bank, and that I've had multiple accounts closed because you're cashing out from Coinbase, or it was usually that I was sending money to Coinbase, right? And so they would close your account. And so you think about that too, that there were threats that, we don't want any mining to occur on our, so you can't use internet to mine. So how do you deal with something like that? Because usually depending on where you are, it is usually a monopoly on that. Not always, right? A lot of communities, they don't have multiple choices until Starlink comes out, other things.
Well, thankfully, on that question, thankfully, mining itself is actually a fairly low bandwidth activity, but it is detectable, right? It is
Right.
something they can snip, right?
Yeah.
In terms of doing packet sniffing, and that's all they do all day, right? That's how, for example, anybody who was into torrenting back in the day,
Yes.
if you didn't have just the right OPSEC there, then you'd get a nasty gram specifically from those two, right? From Time Warner, from Comcast, because they're in bed with all the Hollywood studios. They're buddy.
Yeah, I mentioned this on a different topic, but I downloaded a film that I owned already that I had a copy of, but it was more convenient to just pull a copy and watch it in that situation. And I got my internet shut off. It was a 3 strikes. Remember the 3 strikes? I don't know if that's still a thing, but it was a 3 strikes. I got a strike, and I got a message, and then they allowed me to turn it back on afterwards. I was just like, I don't know. Must have been somebody using my Wi-Fi, and they were like, "Oh, you should be more safe." And I was like, "See, you're right. You don't know it was me, do you?" But they do this stuff, and it's crazy. It's like the amount of time and work and effort spent on tracking down just normal ass people to because it's stupid. I hate it.
Yeah, well, it's like the RIAA case against that mom whose kid downloaded the song back in the day. Napster ruined lives, man, and we remember. You mother, guys, we remember. Like really,
I remember. That's
$100,000 fines to grandmothers.
Yeah.
My biggest fear with mining, as far as security, is actually not even internet. It's just physical. Like I have a farm, and I'm always worried fire or theft, and just not knowing that it's happening, especially because I'm mining in my house. So for me, what I do to protect myself is probably use PDUs to monitor electricity. I use Bluetooth monitors for the temperature control. And I use something else that probably no one really uses, is something called this thing. It's called an Invoxia. This actually runs on the Helium network, and basically it detects whenever things are moving around. So I have a few of these laying in my my server rack. So if GPUs start falling down, I'll know. But that's actually the biggest thing, when you actually have a real server farm and your servers are getting to 150 degrees, and it's this can really cause a fire, and you start smelling something burning.
Yeah.
If there's actually a sensor for smell, that would be great. Be alerted when things start smelling like cinnamon.
Yeah, we had a server closet that didn't even have any mining in it, and we melted the exhaust on the air unit in there, right? And there was not even mining, and that was just a regular. And I can't remember what went wrong, but that stuff's real. You have to worry about it. It's scary. Okay, next question. What do you expect about Helium mining with the new 5G router?
Jay, you were just mentioning that. You want to start off with this?
Actually, I actually have a 5G miner, Helium miner.
Nice. How
So
long did
this
it take
is
you to get that?
well, I actually pre-ordered this like the day they were announced, and I
Ah.
got it like this one took a long time to get. I got this in January, so last month. It comes with ports. Usually these don't come with all these different router ports. So it's all metal. It's by Freedom Fi. I haven't actually set this one up because it's like $1,000 just to get the device, and then it's another like $1,500 to get the 5G itself. So the 5G aspect is actually separate from this, but you can technically put any 5G network onto it, but essentially allow you to run a 5G network. So I'm interested in it more for like running apps on top of Helium. Like I just showed, like this is the very first Helium app that you can actually run. It's just a hardware device. So
Do you know if that's?
yeah, I'm interested in the
I
actual apps.
have somebody who's asking me about. They have a new business and they want to fill in all the networking and wireless and things like that. And I was wondering actually, if so, does that somebody has a 5G phone and that is hooked up with the 5G attachment, and it's, let's say it's inside a building, but of course it attaches to your internet, which is where it pipes the traffic through. Does that mean that if you have a Helium device like inside your building, you're basically giving people 5G access, like 4, like they're going to look at their phone and it's going to be 4 bars. Like, oh, we've got great reception in here. Is that how that kind of works?
It will be a 5G antenna essentially. I mean, essentially, it's giving off a 5G signal. I do wonder too, like if you're stuck on something like Verizon or AT&T, if you're stuck with just using their 5G network, or if you actually are able to get an unlocked phone and then use the Helium 5G network or any other 5G network.
And that pays out based on data that goes through it? Like the more people use it, the more...
Yeah, you'll get paid based on number of devices that are connected to your network. So the more phones that are attached, you'll get more Helium.
Thought to go buy me a
Yes,
bunch
I
of
wonder
phones.
because it has that proof of coverage, but I don't know if it means, is it the amount that goes through it, or is it just the amount of time that you can prove that you without sending stuff over it?
I think
don't
it
know.
has something to do with, so you have neighbors and stuff, and it can, like, depending on how many other, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe, Jay, but depending on how many more are around you, depending on your environment, you'll get paid out more or less. So if there's a high density of people already having coverage there, maybe yours is less valuable than some place that has less density that needs coverage. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's all based on the so how many are around you. When I first started, I was like the only one in my neighborhood Helium device, so I wasn't getting anything because I wasn't able to communicate to any other Helium devices. But then eventually they started to appear, and then I became the center of the entire neighborhood, and I was making like 1 Helium a day, which was amazing. And now I'm making like 0.2 Helium a day just because now everyone's got Helium devices around me. So
Bring it over here, man.
I don't really know exactly.
I got a good spot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
see,
like
I'm
these
a
devices
little bit
too.
worried about them. Yeah, sorry for the interruption. I'm a little bit worried about 5G and Helium networks specifically being set up indoors because of the spectrum, right? That when you're talking about like 5G proper, when you get towards that millimeter wave and penetration into buildings, et cetera, how you can actually get coverage past certain areas. Because as I understand it, that third band of 5G that is closer to millimeter wave has a really difficult time getting through, say, like dense concrete even. Like I don't need a Faraday cage in here to protect me from 5G because I just have typical construction. Like I realize I'm
I know what you
literally
mean.
going to tinfoil hat territory, but like,
No, I follow you, though.
but
I see
like,
what you're saying.
yeah. So I'm kind of worried. Like I'm curious about that too, as far as how the coverage is metered or how it's measured by Helium and what's credited for you. If it is actual connections and uptime with those connections and yeah, how that's going to shape up with 5G if we're talking about it being an IoT proposition where you have to get into buildings. Like, what's that setup going to look like when we really see true 5G? Because you guys remember the rollout or the transition between 3G into now LTE, and we had those growing pains of like WiMAX, and there was HSPA plus, a couple different like bridge technologies that got us more packet density.
Or
But
if you're
wasn't
Apple,
really like what
you
we have
just
now.
change it to say 5 on the same device, and then like, oh, there you go.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we're not looking at true 5G on a lot of networks until like the year 2030. So we're getting sort of pseudo 5G right now, but we're not getting that last band of the spectrum.
You know what's interesting though, and this is what I would like to, because I don't know this, right? But those rollouts are very they were very centralized rollouts. So that, the big cities would get stuff fastest, and then it would very slowly move out into rural. You imagine if there's a mining component to it, that theoretically it would spur people to get into buildings. It would spur the buildings to put them in themselves, right? It's like, well, we're going to make this money too. We're just going to add them. So, screw the big networks. We'll put them in ourselves. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's amazing. If they can, and that's why the question of measurement is important, because if it's easy to fake, that's going to be a big issue, right? Because you come in here, it's like, oh, because I don't know if they're doing it by, is it because I have a certain device or I can prove a certain bandwidth, and I keep saying this is that device, even though we're just doing keep alive transactions in the meantime. I don't, if there's no real adoption on the mobile device side for a while.
Yeah, I'm all for decentralizing communication networks. Just not having Rails centralized is anybody trying to do that is doing it, something worth doing in my book.
Yeah, because like say with mesh as an example, I mean, the only time you really saw extensive use of mesh was when you had, in big cities where you had certain events like the Hong Kong protests. They were using it to get around other issues and stuff like that. Was very interesting. So this could be a really cool application of blockchain tech itself, as that's neat.
Yeah, and that's like things like service nodes, and this is it's kind of like a service node. And that's where I went with mining. I had to branch out the things that I considered mining, right? Because I started with proof of work. I started like really getting into it whenever what was I? It doesn't matter. But eventually I looked into things like what Divi's doing and things like what Oxen's doing. I talk about them all the time, but they have different types of mining. I used to not consider it mining. I used to be like, that's not mining. That's something staking maybe, or that's whatever. But even like service node operations, which is basically a master node that provides a TCP/IP layer for your blockchain, stuff like that is great. And then you just measure uptime and keep everybody in good behavior with incentives, and you get things like LokiNet, which is an onion routed Tor network that's high bandwidth, and you can do. They're working on video conferencing over LokiNet real time.
Yeah, so you're speaking my language,
network.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. Is this coming through, by the way, or is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Is it better, less room tone, or worse?
I can't tell.
Yeah,
same. Right. Okay, great. It probably just didn't switch mic inputs, whatever. Speaking of like.
Oh no, it did because you just got softer.
It's better.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. Hopefully the dead cat helps here too. But dude, you were speaking my language. Shout out to Simon and Josh over at Oxen. So I interviewed them when nobody had heard about, like, at the time, Loki, and because we were just like gem hunting for GPU mineable gems at the time.
Yep.
And prior to getting to this like service layer, like you're talking about, now you're talking about a layer of complexity that people have to really think about. It is that next level of network fabric at home. If you're going to be running this from home, because now you're running an onion routed service, and I mean, like, let me go a little deeper on that. Like, nerding out here, it's this new amalgamation of onion routing that people aren't knowing about Oxen Network. It's I2P, but like better. It's Tor, but like a million times better. It allows for protocols that were never onion routable before. But here's the thing: if you're going to contribute to it, like he's doing on his network, you need to know that that's going to come at the cost of increased scrutiny on your internet traffic coming from that network.
Right. Like, I'm not going to run an exit node from my house, probably. That's not something that I'll do. That's something that I will contact customer service to a host, a provider who's okay with having exit nodes on their network, not at home. You got to decide, now I'll run a relay. I'll run a regular Oxen service node that is not an exit node, but I won't, you have to know what you're putting on your network.
Right. So just to say, like you're saying right there, understanding that the nature of the traffic that you're putting onto the network is that first key. So just saying like, okay, I'm interested in the reward structure, because a lot of new miners come in based entirely on incentives and not thinking about what maybe the implications could be. So especially with service nodes, like you're saying, you brought up Oxen and LokiNet, and it's
I
so
love
cool.
them, yeah.
Right, it's incentivized. It's not like Tor where it's a labor of love, right? Where you're like, oh yeah, I'll contribute too, and
Well, they taught
know.
me. They taught that team. I forget who. There was some AMA I was watching on YouTube, and the point that was made about how the only incentive that exists on Tor's network is negative incentives. Like there's an incentive for you to collude and collect data because that's valuable. There's an incentive for you to de-anonymize people, but there's not an incentive for you to have an honest node. So now you have a situation where service nodes are paid only if they're acting properly and only if they're providing valid and non-collusive services and things like that. So it, and the bandwidth thing, Tor sucks. Tor is amazing. I love Tor. It's one of my favorite useful tools for humanity, but there's reasons that it sucks. And I'm just excited about bringing monetization and incentives to people that are running these nodes so that the concepts are just dramatically improved. It's a different network, but it's just like it's the same thing, but now way better because we added mining to it, basically.
Yeah. Sorry about the tangent there. It's just like
No, I love tangents.
But in particular, man, Oxen is right. It's a sort of like a rabbit hole that's shaped like an ant farm, right? You can go laterally and all
Yeah.
kinds of places with it.
I've even thought about like the way that their network is designed and the way that Din's server on DragonNet is an L1 that could, like, I could see that easily being exposed to LokiNet, so that you could go through LokiNet to access our social network, which would be great, and that's theoretically something that all you would have to do is just start running LokiNet on the same L1, and now it's listening to that traffic too, and not just the regular internet. So you could
Maybe we could do that. We could add that to the when we roll out anonymous posting.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea, because then we would be both an L1 on DragonNet and a Snap on Oxen's network at the same time. So that would be super cool.
Yeah, there are a couple other coordination layers too that offer this that offer these incentives. Sorry, by the way, let me get a little closer. Show you. I went with the Bitcoin eyes.
I was wondering
They're a little
what was in
creepier,
there.
farther away.
Yeah.
But what's more creepy actually is the Ethereum eyes, because they look like
cat
Apex
eyes or
Predator
something.
eyes. Yeah, right. It's
the
weird.
tracking is surprisingly good on that.
Dude, here's the thing, man. OpenCV. Some of the libraries that are just like so incredibly mature, guys. Just for the audience at home, if you don't think that your privacy is at risk, you're so wrong. Anything with a camera is doing this 24/7. Your face can be so easily mapped and scanned, like it's not even funny.
Yeah, that's just a free toy, right?
Yeah. Based on an open source library that has been this mature for about a decade, roughly, give or take. So yeah, but whatever. Like what you're saying though about service nodes, there's some other layers like or some other services, rather blockchains. I'm thinking of Akash network. I'm thinking of Flux network. That allows.
I've talked about Flux before too. I like what they're doing with infrastructure, I guess.
Yeah, Akash is doing a similar thing. I think they don't offer that same level of anonymity and privacy as a primitive, though, like you're saying with Oxen. So being able to work with some of these projects that are already moving in that direction, so you have privacy or at least anonymity on the network as a primitive for whatever else you're going to deploy there. Is I think it's a really strong move in terms of investor narrative, where most people aren't aware of how much they need privacy, but if you can partner early on and then demonstrate clearly there are incentives to participate in privacy, and it's just good for you. People kind of need to see the incentive first.
What I want to see is this melding of decentralization and privacy at the same time. And so, like Oxen's network, for example, you still have a server that's like a single point of failure, theoretically, whenever you're running a snap. You mentioned Flux. They have a redundant decentralized server system to where there is no one central server. It's just running on Flux on like 5 different Docker containers, and they dynamically spin up a new one if one of them goes offline. There's no reason that you can't run what do you call it? A Flux, well, run on Flux. But then that, when you're running on Flux, that could also be an Oxen service node or a snap that's on Oxen's network. So then, even if one network doesn't provide a specific feature that you're looking for, there's no reason you can't combine different networks and different services. And this is kind of an interchain thing, interop thing, but literally stacking them together like Legos is becoming increasingly easy to do.
Yeah, I get the sense you're going to be writing that tactical guide on how to create Docker redundancy across like 4 different incentivized blockchain networks, so you get the rewards of all of them.
The bulletproofness of it, the resiliency of it. That's what I like. Is the unfuckwithableness, that kind of thing.
That's the right word, man. That's great.
Very good, very good. Next, you can go next. Okay, we have Matter Lover. Question: I have 2 laptops. To do some GPU mining, what would I need to purchase to GPU mine on my computer?
External GPU, they exist.
Yeah, and the PCI Express requirements, like it's actually very low bandwidth in terms of typical mining. It's not like even video games run, they're serviceable, but there's an amount of PCI Express. You need a certain number of PCI Express lanes to be able to get that really great throughput to load scene files into memory on a GPU. Just not a requirement for mining for most algorithms. Or if it does spin up something into memory, a la DAG file, like with Ethereum mining, you're not going to feel the difference at all. Your hash rate will be the same.
I see a lot of those riser cables that are just 1 pin or something, right? PCIe either 4 or 1 instead of the 16, the full 16.
Oh yeah, and it's second generation sometimes, or first generation PCIe, so the bandwidth is extra constrained. You're sipping through a little like coffee straw. It's not much data at all.
So yeah, you can get enclosures that are external GPU enclosures, and you can put desktop GPUs in it, and then you can run it over like USB 3 or something. So technically, that's an option. There's latency there. I don't know how that affects it.
How's the availability of those? Like, can you buy those now? I mean, if you get, GPUs are hard to get. Are those more hard to get?
You can get GPUs. Yeah. You're just not going to get. You're going to have a hard time getting. Like, yes, you have to be patient. What you got to do right now is you got to be on the hey, I want this list. Notify me when it's back in stock, and then be available and ready to hit the button that says buy, and you can get it at MSRP.
Or if you want it immediately. Yeah, sorry. If you want it immediately, get a laptop that has the GPU that you want in it, and prepare to just deal with the pains of a mobile GPU.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff you can set up IFTTT or something on I don't know what there is anymore for hardware lists on Reddit or anything. I used to do stuff like that, so you could snipe them. Somebody just put them out for unbelievable price, and then you can just.
You can also do. This is way outside of operating at home or something, but you can do co-location, and you can also do. Jay, you might know a little bit more about this, but on services like NiceHash, you can rent hash power from people that do have more hardware. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I just know that it's a service that I see offered if you don't have your own gear and you want to get into mining somehow.
Yeah, that's what NiceHash is. That's actually what I only do is I only provide my computational power to NiceHash. So I don't rent the service. I just provide the power. Right now, I don't really recommend necessarily to get into GPU mining because it's very not as profitable as it was like a year ago or even a few months ago. Like the ROI on a typical GPU, like say a 3060, now they're going for like $600 on eBay, and the ROI on it's going to take like a little more than 9 months, 10 months, and even then it's like, where's the bull run really going to be in 10 months? So you have to really think about that if you're mining.
What do you think the people that don't just liquidate their mining rigs whenever Ethereum goes proof of stake? Where do you think that GPU hash rate's gonna? Is there chatter about where that's gonna move to? Is it gonna go to Raven?
It's all going to Raven coin.
Is it?
Probably.
I disagree in strongest terms.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So Raven,
Yeah.
or who else would it go to? What do you
So
think?
Jay's listening to Michael Carter, Bits Be Trippin', who I love dearly, and he's great, but he's wrong. And yeah, so here's why. Raven has stagnated in its development roadmap. And I say that with the greatest respect and love for Tron and for Jeremy, who are building the product. But Flux is delivering on roadmap items. Flux is creating
I forgot
partnerships
they
and
were.
the enhanced service nodes. And yeah, their security is still entirely proof of work. Despite the fact that they have the service node network, they haven't created any kind of a hybrid proof of stake consensus layer in that node network. So right now, 100% of security still happening on GPUs. So, and it can accommodate that scale because they have a roadmap that has real world applications. Raven, I'm sorry. I know they launched the NFT platform. That's really exciting. I'm happy for them. I just don't see it making the same kind of waves in terms of third-party participation that Flux is doing.
Do you know anything?
And I think that the hash rate is validating that.
Do you know anything about what Sia or Sia Coin is doing with their Skynet storage layer? They're basically they're creating blockchains within their storage layer, and it's going to be like hyper NFTization on their networks.
Jeez.
They've got this
I mean,
whole
I've looked up their
ecosystem going out.
documentation.
But
Yeah,
their
a little bit of documentation
GPU,
weird.
their GPU mining as well. I'm pretty sure they're proof of work GPUs on
Yeah.
Sia Coin too. So
They
I don't know.
Sicoin hasn't been GPU mineable for a while.
Are you sure?
Pretty sure. So
Huh.
shout out to David Vorek, right? Who
Oh, you
runs,
CPU mineable. You said, what are you talking about? Say it again. They're not GPU mineable.
They're not GPU mineable. They've been on an ASIC algorithm, and they had a
with
bespoke
Handshake.
ASIC created for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a bespoke
Yeah, I got caught
algorithm
up in that
created
mess.
for that ASIC.
That was a headache. Man.
That's right.
Can I tell you that my biggest gripe, because I love Sidecoin, my biggest gripe from back when they launched all that stuff is when they had the big announcement coming, and I can't remember, people were hyping it and everything, and I thought these guys are going to be brilliant when they come out with an at-home or an in-business storage device that can immediately handle decentralization. It's like, no, here's an ASIC miner, and it's like, why do I care about that? I mean, it's like, just put out a storage device and you freaking control that entire world.
Yeah, there's an entirely separate economy as far as that goes. So let me break down something, and I've got to give credit where it's due. So Ogata Girl, Christy Lee Minahan, and myself, we ran a weekly show some years ago now. It's been forever. We hardly even talk anymore. But she broke down the economics of getting a new ASIC developed and fabbed for me. And apparently, all in your first run to get everything done, to get all your dies set, and to spec out the full schematics and do your first full run of ASICs, anywhere between about, I mean, on the low end, you could spend maybe $40 million, all the way up to maybe 10 million, depending on the complexity of the ASIC design for your own, and including having your own custom algorithm done. This is what happened with X11, right, for Dash back in the day. They said was, oh yeah,
I've got 2 of those machines. Those paperweights, I've got 2.
I cut one in half with a water jet for content just a couple months ago, but it's not playing well, so I'm not going to release the footage. But but yeah, man, no, I hear you. It's painful. The old D3, it's like, so these algorithms, they unfortunately, there's so many of these manufacturers that think it's right, that they'll never be taken over by some other system, right? Like that they're going to be flawless. But the point is, between 4 to, on the high end, $10 million to get a new algorithm developed, spec out the new boards, right? Get all the schematics done, do your testing, get it all the way to production, have your first run of a few thousand units that go to market, and then you're ready to apply your markup. Or if you have a captive audience, say like, look, this is the direction we're going. If you want to contribute, get on board. Gosh darn it. Be a good citizen of our blockchain and buy this ASIC. You're the best. Thanks.
That's a good application for a DAO. I was thinking this morning, I was writing a little bit about the danger of centralization when you have hashing algorithms that can be easily made into, more and more, well, like people with money ending up being the ones that can afford to have these machines. Like Jack Dorsey's going into mining, and Intel now is going into creating ASICs and things like that.
Well,
What do you
Intel's entry is good, and we want this. Let's circle back to that in a minute.
Sure. That's good that we're going to be producing some of them here. You know, I remember speaking of the D3 miner. That was around the same time that the Antbleed bug was revealed, where Bitmain had a kill switch that they could arbitrarily throw, and it would just disable. It would brick all of the ant miners that existed. And so one of the first things I did was I found some kid that figured out how to turn it off and released some new firmware. I was like, cool, give me that. It had a 1% fee to him, but I was like, I'd rather pay a 1% than have someone's kill switch, you know? I was going to ask, though, what do you think about, this is sort of related, I guess. What do you think about RandomX? What do you think about the effort to keep mining on a CPU? Like with that Monero developed? What are your opinions on that? And Jay, same, and Sean, all of you, same question. What do you think?
Yeah, I need to stop talking for a minute. I'll defer to Jay. Sorry, I'm kind of a loudmouth.
Yeah, with RandomX, I mean, the reason I like Raptorium is because it's actually using RandomX and like 11 other algorithms inside of it. So it's kind of difficult to actually crack if it ever were to be. I like the idea of CPUs being used in mining more because CPUs are really great. Like in general, like even if you're mining and you buy all this hardware, like eventually you're like, oh, I just want to use it like as a render farm to make video content or 3Ds. It's like CPU mining is, I think, the true next thing because there's so many GPUs out there. CPUs are the real thinker of the computer.
Yeah, and I like, to the question is about a laptop, and this is something that you could run. This is something that you could do on a laptop easily, and it would be, whatever your hash rate of your CPU is what you're adding to the pool. So that's something this person could do too. I like. So what scares me about CPU mining is competition from botnets and IoT devices and things like that. But from what and this is what I'm working with behind me, is I've got the house fan blowing on a machine that I've got torn apart, and I'm trying, to see if a few things are different, different things are worth it. But basically, I'm finding that it relies so heavily on L3 cache in the CPU that I just don't see IoT and botnets being that big of a problem because those are typically low-end devices. Now there's the number game. There's more of them. But I don't know. Do you have any opinions on like the feasibility of CPU mining when it comes to like maybe you don't make an ASIC for it, but you run a botnet, or you have a worm that's, I guess, the same thing, just people's browsers mining it. If you go to a website, are there dangers of that?
They're big time. Yeah, when RandomX was first conceived of, when it first started to go into production, I lovingly nicknamed it Random Botnex. So like, because it's just going to happen, man. Like where there's incentive, there's bad faith action. So yeah, it has happened. It happened in the past. It makes me kind of sad that they had to move away from the original Kryptonite algorithm, which was already CPU mineable for a while until an ASIC was developed for it.
There's an ASIC. There's like 2 or 3 different ASICs. Every time they changed Kryptonite, another ASIC came out.
Right.
Well, the thing about that is, the negatives. Obviously, if you're burning up my power to mine on my tiny device that I have, on my desk, and I'm a grandpa or something, and it's sitting there, it's doing that. But at the same time, you're spending your money there instead of sending me crap emails or trying to phish me or something. Maybe it's a decent thing, and the network has improved, so it's kind of an odd thing. It's like
you're actually bringing strength to the network.
There are tons, because it's the same thing as anything else in the regular system outside of crypto. The bean counter is pulled. When you open a cereal box, it has less cereal in it now. It's a smaller box. They freaking change the top. It's like, those are horrible things in my life. It's like, you can't actually close a cereal box anymore because they're saving, probably maybe a tenth of a cent on reducing the amount of cardboard there. And, they claim it's environmental reasons, but it's because that tenth of a cent makes a lot more money for them, and they have to report it in their earnings and all that crap. And it's like, that's a bad thing. But that's the exact same thing. It's all these efficiencies that work through the network. And if there's an incentive to do it, this is just a broader open network incentive that, if you could tap into some of those same supply chains and find ways to pull that money out, people would do it. So that's all this is. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I'm going to say graduates of Techstars and other tech incubators, when you get your cloud credits, for like GCP and Azure and all the other cloud
Yes.
providers, I promise you, there's a healthy percentage of people who, instead of running whatever containers are, whatever tests they're going to do, whatever test suites they're going to do for their proposed tech startup, when they know they're about to time out on their cloud credits, they run mining. And none of the cloud services stop them still to this day. It's when you go for like the free tier and you're like not somebody who's a known person in that space that they get their undies in a bunch. But nah, man, you go ahead and get your go through like a Y Combinator affiliate or like a Techstars affiliate as your startup, and leave with your 100K or 250K in credits. You'll be mining in no time. Like, they won't stop you. But that's my thoughts on RandomX, is that it was inevitable that it would go to botnets.
Unused capacity and like underutilized data centers. Same thing with the power plant, having underused excess power. Now you've got underutilized data centers with CPUs that are cold that could be earning you.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if that's actually their problem these days, though. And like you're saying, the L3 cache being a bit of a limitation for RandomX, I think that was a bigger problem prior to a certain architecture. But I'll bring us back a little bit in terms of server architecture, or like server CPU architecture. Even just the Xeon E5 V2, and we're talking almost 10 years old now. They're fine. They fly on RandomX. You look at their benchmarks, and they still have some of the highest efficiency scores.
That's what I've got running
best kept
right
secret.
now. I've got 2 Milan Epics dual socket running right now, and they've got 256 megabytes of L3 each. So that's not a shortage.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All I'm just going to say is that, like, as far as server architecture, cloud architecture, as long as you're not like whatever, as long as you haven't just provisioned like ARM servers, right? Like, you probably have
Another
enough
project I love,
to handle it.
A company I love is ARM, and ARM and what is the Open Risk or something like that? That those CPUs are really cool.
Yeah, I think to your point though, if we can get to a point like where CPU mining becomes a bit of a focus for more blockchain security, and we can continue to innovate in that space, I think RandomX is a good stepping stone. But I think so Satoshi Nakamoto in the white paper explicitly declared that it was meant to be one CPU, one vote. And I'm not going to do the whole cult of Satoshi thing, right? Where him is our tech prophet or whatever. There is one blockchain and its prophet is Satoshi. Like, it gets kind of cultish, But I do think it's really sound logic to say,
drank
like,
the Kool-Aid for a long time there. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, like, you got some characters on Clubhouse that are literally trying to start 501c3s and call them churches of blockchain and Bitcoin and stuff. I think that's maybe a bridge too far. Maybe.
I'm okay with that. I don't like making bombs, so I'm okay with not paying taxes.
Well,
Awesome,
it's an
man.
interesting thing too, because I think philosophically you can look. That white paper was a point in time, and many things can't be predicted when you do. You try to write stuff like that in a way that is flexible, or at least oriented philosophically, which I think largely that white paper was. It might, it depends on how literally you take it, because one CPU, one vote didn't hold, but theoretically, algorithmically, you can model things that can still almost force people to use one CPU, one vote, right?
Right, and that's what I do like about RandomX, for example, is it dynamically creates an algorithm on the fly, so that basically every time it changes, that's a new ASIC you'd have to make. Is kind of the loose idea there.
Yeah.
So I like that it mitigates that, and they did a good, like we were just talking about, they did a good job of getting rid of ASICs, but that doesn't mean there aren't other centralized ways to do it.
And I was always super interested in that, because when the speaking of all the Bitcoin maximalism and all that in the middle of the block size debate, one of the more interesting threads of discussion that came out of it, and I'm pretty sure it was Luke Jr. that kind of brought it up, was the potential to at least switch algorithms in a way that would make it harder. And I think it would be brilliant, because you would have, if one of the 10 algorithms were mineable on this ASIC I own, it would be beautiful, because I would just keep trying on that one, and I would occasionally get one, but others would be winning on other algorithms. The algorithms would compete is my main point. I would love to have more, because right now we have that, but the algorithms, there's a lot of politics colluding the objective evaluation of it, that you have algorithms that are competing with each other on all these various networks, and it's super radically interesting, because you can measure them by adoption, you can measure them by network size, you can measure them by how much value is in the market cap, but it's cool.
Funny enough, who kind of did what you're describing? So I'm a little bit reminded of what Ghostwriter does. You were talking about, Jay, you were talking about Raptorium, and they have Ghostwriter, which switches algorithms on the fly and stuff like that. You could add a GPU mineable algorithm in there, and then whenever it switches to that, that's just kicks your GPU on, and otherwise you're not using any power and turns off. But
well, I think Charlie, when he made Ghostwriter, I think he was really trying to keep it CPU only, and some clever person out there innovated a GPU implementation of it. So, like, I think that's usually the best intention when an algorithm is first written, is to have it be as decentralized as possible vis-a-vis CPU architecture. And then it's always some gigabrain out of Ukraine who's like, I got all these GPUs though, so it's
that's
a
an
GPU shaped hole. Give me
it's an incentive to build that GPU miner. But what I was going to say, Joe, is I don't know if this would ring a bell or not, but who kind of did that, where you could have the same chain, but you could have either an ASIC, a GPU, or a CPU, and you just mine whichever algorithm that you wanted to. Was freaking Badcoin. The Bad Crypto podcast? Those guys made with with what is his name? Not is it? I forget his name right now. But they got with somebody. They made a network called Badcoin, specifically so that you could mine it. It's mineable on bad CPUs. Was the theory. Like if you have a shitty computer, you can mine it on there.
Love it.
So
I don't know, man. The whole project sounds bad.
Yeah.
You know who else does it?
It's a great learning
Epic Cash.
experience. I don't know that one.
Yeah, you should look it up. So here's why I say that. Nothing against Joel or the team over there. I just
I was just saying it was interesting, and it was very educational. Whenever I was like learning how they did that and stuff, it was neat.
Yeah, so Epic Cash is it's similar. What they did was they went really far out of their way to make sure that they had the hardest algorithm known at the time for each one of those categories. So they went with RandomX for CPUs. They went with ProgPow, programmatic proof of work, if you're familiar with it, for GPUs. And then they just went with I think it was plain vanilla SHA-256 for the ASICs, because it's like we know there's availability and whatever. Like we might get completely hashed nuked over there sometimes, but because it's weighted, we know that consensus won't be entirely dependent on ASICs. It won't be entirely dependent on GPU or CPU. And people who contribute on those other sides, like the CPU and GPU, they're going to be forced to push that hardware to the max. So regardless of the architecture or its ability, it's going to really stress test anybody who wants to commit any hashes to this network. Like it's a genuine commitment, because it's pushing every bit of silicon for that hardware
That's
profile.
cool, man, because to plug in real quick, we just released site-wide governance, and that reminds me of we have 3 categories, right? So even if one category got compromised on for hashing, for example, the other 2 would make up for it. You still have a 2 out of 3. Even if ASICs got wrecked,
and
you still have 2
of those categories are split as well, so that the
true
proponents of the various roles might between the liquidity and the behavior. So yeah, it's cool. Okay, next question. It might be the last question, depending. Let's see here. Angel Breaker question: what concepts exist to avoid the classical environment unfriendly mining argument? Right. So, to avoid it and/or to counter the argument. What do you guys think?
I think CPU mining actually can be part of it. It only uses way less electricity than GPUs, as well as even hard drive mining, which uses even less electricity for what's that, Chia coin?
I'm gonna push back on that also, because of the plotting of Chia and Burstcoin before it. You were tearing through NVMEs and filling up landfills with solid state e-waste. So there's no free lunch with proof of work. The entire point is that it's meant to prove that there's investment.
I'll push back on that, actually.
There's ongoing investment.
because I'll push back on that because I plot in memory. I don't plot on SSDs. So
You're an outlier.
You could use RAM disk
We'll
now.
stop.
You could use a RAM disk.
but anybody who's
Yeah,
putting
you always
in-
could.
Yeah.
But the point is that you'd be an outlier if you did that. And Der Bauer, I think, demonstrated how to use a RAM disk for that particular thing. To point to a creator that saw that problem early on, and found that there wasn't all that much.
I would promote that creator too. Yep.
Totally, yeah, totally. And I'm not. I mean, obviously, I'm not shilling. I've got my own content channel that if I wanted to shill, I'd love to have more subscribers there. But I just agreed with Der Bauer in the sense that like there's a bit of a false economy there when we point to the greenness of Chia, and he was done with Chia very very early on because of some of the false economy or the false equivalence of like, well, hard drive's green, ergo all of Chia is green.
I don't buy that either.
Is the hardest part.
Yeah, I don't buy that either. The green thing, I believe, is directly a result of the attacks on Bitcoin to stand out and say, oh, but we're a green one. So we don't, so we can escape that. Whatever your problem is with cryptocurrency, we don't count because we're green. I think that's just marketing and that's it, personally.
Right.
And
then
that's
beyond
true. They really moved away from the, it's only for criminals, it's only for bad people, and really just latched on to that, the worst thing for the economy. And the thing we talked about a million times is that even intelligent people will just repeat what they're told if they don't do their own research. So you can have intelligent people. Who was it? I don't know. I was watching some guy, and he started talking about crypto, and he said that Bitcoin uses more electricity than like most countries. And the things he was spouting was obvious ridiculousness. But, that's just what he was told. And then you're able to come from a place of moral superiority because you believe what you're saying, and then people listening to you believe what you're saying.
That's kind of like you
and
last
then
week.
it's urgent. Yeah, it becomes urgent there, right? When it's like, oh, no, hold on. Think of the children. The power is being wasted.
Yeah.
You're going to boil the oceans. We got to do something fast. It was like the climate change debate. Bro, the 1970s produced photovoltaics that were supposed to change the world. Everybody was going to live on photovoltaics and lead acid battery arrays somehow. Like that was going to save us from polluting the world if we could, just improve battery technology, which we finally have. But if we ever were able to strip mine all of the lithium necessary to be able to put us all on redundant, backup battery grids, then we will have strip mined all of the lithium in the world.
Well,
it
that
never
was
ends.
always kind of my thing too, is because I'm a big fan of Tesla and Elon Musk and SpaceX and all of that. And then whenever I felt like my community was being attacked for being environmentally damaging, but Tesla's being praised for saving the environment, I'm just like, they use tons of electricity and lithium. Are you kidding
And
me?
slave labor.
And water.
But what
How much water does it take to build one Tesla, man? I mean,
I have no
as far
idea.
as like precious resources that are needed.
I think generally, especially in the crypto community, people need to be prepared, ready, and able to avoid or push off the virtue, because there are going to be tons more. The virtue signal attacks that are going to come. I was like, oh, it's all single white males that are mining crypto. It's evil. That's going to come at some point.
I've gotten that once already, basically.
I mean, we aren't doing anything to change that impression. Here on this
it's
panel.
like exactly, and
Not on this show right now.
It's like I don't care what anybody is. It's like I don't, that shouldn't come into the debate. It's like, what works? How does this work? And the fact that it is an open network, the fact that anyone in the world, including like you could look at our project and the fact that we have tons of people that are not living in the West, that have plenty of disposable income, and crypto allows that. And you could go to any other network. It's the first time you can invest in something that is new, remarkable tech that you don't have to be an insider and with an address in Silicon Valley, right? It's the first time you could do that, and they don't like that. A lot of people don't like it, and they've set up. It's almost like Bene Gesserit setting up issues that they can leverage against anything that they need to in the future. When they say, here's green energy, we're going to push it. We're going to program the youth. We're going to brainwash. You could go to Disney and have Disney characters. I mean, I've taken the kids to Disney. And you're like, they're freaking proselytizing green energy to my kids in this freaking walk through, the most boring part of the park that we thought might be something in there, right? And you think about that. that whole thing is worked in. Like the kids in school today think that in their lifetime, the oceans are going, California is going to be erased, good or bad, depending on who you are.
I mean,
but
that wouldn't be the worst thing.
Right. But it's like, it's crazy. And, and what was it? I mean, 20 years ago, we were supposed to, I think in the early 2000s, the end of the world was supposed to happen. And now it's just, it's another 12 years, right? It's always another 12 years. And they set that up so they can use it
always
for
do that.
any other.
I remember when I was a kid, it's this flat Earth mentality where something can be said that makes sense by someone who believes it, and you're like, well, that does make sense, and you question. As a kid, we were told, hey, there's only so much clean water, and if you leave your sink on when you do the dishes, all the water's gonna be gone, and you're gonna die when you're like 30. And I was like, wow, that makes sense because the lake is only so big, and once the water's gone, it's gone. And they're like, hey, look at this desert. That used to be the biggest lake in the world 500 years ago. And I'm like, oh my God, it's real. So I remember being in second grade, like, oh, I'm going to die.
And it's very powerful. It's very powerful because all they have to do now is come in and say, and it could have been a different tech. It could, but the fact that the biggest threat to a lot of those interests is potentially it's money, right? So you think about what Bitcoin and other crypto can do with money, and when people start to wake up and say, wait a minute, my house went up really well. We had a great increase in value of my house, but that money was in crypto for that same period of time. So people see that, and it doesn't matter what level of risk. If that upside is like that, it changes people's opinion. That's a threat. So, it's not green, right? And so,
Joe,
that's the
you're making an argument there, though, that only appeals to a rational investor, whether they're retail or they've got a little bit more experience. Unfortunately, that does require some education and some really good financial habits that a lot of people don't have. So that's great for one side of your potential audience. Let me throw on more appropriate eyes here for, we want to get dirty. Let's hit below the belt here. So when people say like, oh no, it's not green and you have problems and you stole all the GPUs and I'm a gamer and I hate you. Like, because seriously, I've been living that life for the last 3 years on YouTube. The gamers just like spam the crap out of the comments. But you push back and it's like, that cool story, bro. For every kilowatt hour of power consumed of you playing whatever, man, you're a Fortnite pro. Awesome. Is that going on your resume, going on your CV? Also, what value are you providing to the world? I get that you're enjoying yourself, and I don't have a problem with that. But what value are you providing to the world for the amount of power consumed? Because I can prove to you for every kilowatt hour, every watt hour, we can go, you scale that all the way down. And I can prove to you the exact Satoshi value or the exact, Ether value or the exact Pico Monero value or whatever our unit of account is. I can prove to you the value. And like you said, Joe, over time, we can map out how much more valuable that GPU compute cycle was, or whatever that instruction cycle was on a CPU or something else. We can map that out. We've got the algebra to describe exactly how valuable my activity is. You're gaming, you're watching Netflix, you doing all this other idle games on your phone and stuff. You cannot account for that for me. So you have no moral ground.
That is why, in my opinion, number go up, and the world of crypto and the fact that it's focused so heavily on that number, particularly Bitcoin, but other as well. There's negative, there's positive to that. But the interesting thing about it is it makes it measurable in something that people can understand. It's a dollar value of how much energy, when applied to this, actually results in, which will bring nations out of poverty and which will bring people out of poverty, which is massive value to the world, beyond even just that number. And the funny thing is, that's why people get distracted with that number on social media and stuff. And frankly, we need to be more bold about declaring the philosophical values around it, because it's not just about the number. It's about the fact that number is accessible to anyone, right? All you have to do is choose to wake up and join in, and you can get some benefit. And the people who most need it are they are starting to wake up and get involved, and it's an amazing thing. And that's why you can't use those virtue signaling arguments against something that has that real value. Because you could talk about liberty, you could talk about bringing people out of poverty. You combine those two things, that's everything you need, right? The rest of it is like, oh, it might not be green, but guess what? The alternatives aren't either, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, a lot of people are starting to wake up
us-
to that kind of propaganda, just that BS. I mean, just coming back to water for some reason. I remember years and years ago, I found out that the entire nation of Africa, the entire continent of Africa could have clean drinking water. And it was either $3 billion and 5 cargo ships, or $5 billion and 3 cargo ships. And if they had stacked water makers, and just pumping it from the ocean, that's it. We have the technology. It's not super expensive.
We do it
We
actually.
choose the planet, but no one would do it. No one's doing it.
We do it for. I was in the Navy. We did it for the hurricane relief. We would park an aircraft carrier offshore, and then we would use our desalinization plants to create fresh water, and then we would helicopter drop water into communities.
I would tell you, it's never about the core issue with most poor nations is corruption at the highest level. And there's an interesting narrative that whenever you talk about CDBCs, that it's scary because it's more control, it's traceability of cash, things like that. But if used correctly, like say, Nicaragua, with the philosophical angles, you could if how do I say this? If central banks were transparent and had controlled supplies like Bitcoin does, it would just create value. Now that requires, how do you want to govern it so that it's not tyrannical? That's important, right? But it's an interesting thing, and whether the nation adopts Bitcoin as its central currency or to back its currency with control, that can change some of that stuff, because most of those nations that have issues with not being able to get, even though the resources are there, and even though that why are these people not rich? It's because of corruption.
They don't have. Well, they also don't have negotiating power, man. Read. Here's a book title for the audience: "Confessions of an Economic Hitman." Huge eye opener in terms of toxic lending originating from the United States and our central banking system here internationally over multiple generations. Right? We've, in the same way that we've created enemies in sandy countries across the pond, we've also created impoverished partners in South American countries and everywhere else in the world. But to circle back to the beginning and kind of tie this off of the bow though from earlier on, what you're saying, we're almost going back to full circle here, where you say we're going to see certain countries enriched and certain people enriched again and certain people's lifestyle changed. But that is why there is so much urgency in getting our country, the spot of dirt that we're standing on right now is pretty damn important for those of us who are interested in blockchain, because there are a finite number of block subsidies, a finite number of blocks left in which there will be a subsidy on Bitcoin and certain other blockchains. And if we do think that they're going to form the basis of a new economic system, then we're not going to see that just certain nations are enriched, but those that understand the power of what's happening here will become new world powers. It is going to change the course of history. France is no longer a world power. Britain is no longer a world power as they once were. Sure, they're part of Five Eyes, but they're not a world power the way they once were. Right? They used to be synonymous with total global domination. They're not anymore. We are, and if we want to stay that way here in the Western Hemisphere, we have to put ourselves into the deal flow of capturing the new economy. The U.S. dollar will not cut it 10 to 20 years from now. Those of us, I think, on this call are convinced of that. But if we don't leverage what's happening now to jockey for position, and I know it sounds distasteful because it sounds an awful lot like empire building and a lot of the really nasty stuff that's happened throughout history. But guess what? It happened throughout history, not because of scarcity of resources, like you said, but scarcity of leadership and a desire to be able to craft the next chapter in history.
And a lot of it is because of infighting, and I think the biggest problem that we have is lobbyists from other interests that don't want to see this happen, and which means it'll happen somewhere. But that's the biggest danger to this country, national security, right now. I think is that there's damn lobbyists from the banks and even the VCs, and I don't know, some of the payments networks. It's just it's too scary for them, but it's ridiculous. Anyway, so we're probably.
I want to hit the chat real quick. Because they wanted to. You said a lot of bad VPNs. I wanted to get some suggestions on good ones. Also, they want us to make out with each other.
Far out. The last thing that I wanted to say while you're trying to figure out
straight white cis males
VPNs to put across,
not all
I want to
of us.
follow up on Sean after he's done.
Also, we can get the next question. I think.
Oh, okay.
We only have we're at an hour and a half.
It's a simple question. It's, can you go to the library and mine a couple times?
That is a good one. It's like stolen energy for mining is a super interesting topic.
We could go into that.
I don't
it's
think
illegal,
you can, but I'd like to know from you if you can actually do that. With
I don't know what the terms of service are at your local library. They might not have it in their terms that you can't. They probably have something that you can't install something on a computer. It doesn't. Maybe they don't have terms that you couldn't put a thumb drive in, and while you're sitting there browsing, that it could be mining.
Well,
it depends on their terms. It's not necessarily.
Anytime
illegal,
I've seen someone try to leverage free energy, the longer you use it and the more you use, you're going to get found out. All you got to do is go over to the circuit breaker, figure out which one's hot, and then see what circuit.
But you're not stealing energy. You're allowed to be on the computer.
Yeah, this is an interesting case. It depends on the terms, and that would probably
economically, it's not even worth it, because typically with a lot of like a Monero mining with the CPU of a library computer, you'll have to be mining for a long time just to even get a payout.
But Jay, you could bring in your own machine theoretically.
You plug in GPU. The external
you can plug
GPU.
in a GPU onto that machine and do it. Is that illegal or not? I don't know, right? Depends on their terms.
I don't want to stay at the library all day doing that, though.
Yeah, find the 240-volt circuit and plug in an S19 Pro J or whatever. Like, see how long that lasts. I think Jay's point totally stands.
I'm gonna say something controversial, but if anybody's interested in doing that, maybe tap into the line where you have a red light camera.
Oh my God!
And pull some of that power, right?
Hold on. What about donating like 10 computers to the library?
Oh my God.
So they can offer them free, so they pay for your mine.
All set up with software for them and everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Why is that? By the way, theoretically, in all truth, although, I don't know, you would think that would be a subsidy that some libraries might accept. Sure, we'll pay the power on that because we can't afford these machines yet, and we only give you a term that would effectively make it reasonable for us.
And then you write it off on taxes as a donation, charitable donation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That might be possible. Who knows? That's a complex, and to deal with local libraries would not be very
morally. No, it's terrible, but otherwise, I wanted to say real quick though. This is going to take long at all, but I think it's important to say that the conversation about green energy is awesome. I'm all for green energy and getting it cleaner and things like that. I think that the conversation about energy conservation is a little bit misdirected. I think that's a very good stopgap measure for getting us into cleaner sources of energy, but I don't think reducing energy consumption should be the goal. I think energy is amazing and it's useful. I think that there's plenty of energy available that's clean and able to, like right there, the fusion reactor in the sky, and there's stuff that we can do. The goal, I think, should be transitioning from oil and environmentally damaging energies into renewable and clean energy. And so the argument that, this uses too much energy, I think is not a good argument, because use as much of it as you want as long as it's sustainable and good. We just need better sources of energy, not less of it.
Can I add to that I've been surprised in my career literally surprised. Some people are very intelligent, coders, especially younger, that were just brainwashed about that stuff. It's like, we can't do that. That's going to destroy everything. And I'm like, objective measure is important, right? That, the various countries in the West compared to say China are using energy in a more clean way, and yet you look at some of the internet, some of the agreements that were made, it's very backwards, and doesn't make sense. So you have to take that into consideration, and it's all market based. When it is effectively more efficient to use various types, it'll happen, right? So yes, research. You think about it, it's like, obviously we want research. How can we be more efficient? Can we find a controlled fusion mechanism? That would be beautiful, right? But spend the money there, sure. But it's like, the rest of it is anything that relies on proselytation to the youth to program that there's going to be something false there. So it's just too weak. Anyway, so you want to go through the round? We can do we're out. Yeah.
Can I answer that one question from chat, because it's a one-word answer? Mulvad, MULLVAD.
I was
That's going
trying
be
to think of them. I couldn't remember that name. I used that in the past. They're great.
Yeah. So really briefly, you can find them as a Tor hidden site. They've got a listed site, so you can use Tor browser or just a Tor window on Brave to go there. You can sign up without using doxed credentials, and you can pay in cryptocurrency. So you start off on the right foot, and then you continue to use it anonymously.
Beautiful. All right, let's do rounds. Dave, what is coming?
Cool. Yeah, so we've got a governance call to talk about it at 3 o'clock today, Eastern time. But I just wanted to say that we just have released something very unique, which is, I think, it's something that I've never seen done in this way before, and I see it as an iteration of the DAO concept into something that is more scalable and able to incorporate non-crypto people in a way that's very unique. And so I encourage you to check out Ben Social, look at our governance systems there, and join us for the call if you're interested in that on Thursdays at 3, where we do our governance calls.
Perfect. Sean.
3 Eastern, that is.
Yes. Sean, what's up?
Be on Rice TVX tomorrow for the Crypto Rewind. Tuesdays, the new normal over on Litecoin Lisa. Check me out on my YouTube and Twitters and all that stuff. Also, mine, don't forget to go talk about your phone. You haven't talked about it. Just want to remind you.
Yeah. So I'm strongly considering a change as far as that offering goes into just a flashing service instead of offering the full phone. But the thing that I'm looking for right now, wanting to promote at the moment, is I do work full-time in crypto, so I don't contribute to DAOs in order to carve off a little bit of profit. I work in marketing because there's always a need for various projects, and I'm looking for assistance, and we are looking for new employees. So if you know how to perform marketing functions, anybody in the audience, and you're looking for additional part-time work to start getting significant earnings in crypto, right? Mine cryptocurrency with your own labor, then do hit me up at the links you see down below or on Twitter.
Excellent. All right, Jay.
Yeah, announcing a big project next month at South by Southwest in partnership with the video game company Interplay. So that's coming up very soon. Otherwise, you can meet me in Decentralized at 7029 next to the Binance building is the Mirror Vision Gallery.
Awesome. Excellent. And for Dragonchain, we have a bunch of stuff going on. We have a interchain that might be coming out with a so far undisclosed network, and hopefully a few others might come after that, depending on what we decide to do and what we're requested to do. And we have a couple other projects that should be pretty exciting. We're hoping we don't have anything set to announce, but we're hoping that we'll be able to start disclosing some of it in spring and. It might roll out in summer, depending, but at least we'll kind of get a start in the spring. So really fun stuff. Thanks everybody for coming on. Make sure you go to dragonchain.store, buy some merch. Get a Dragonchain metal shirt, and and we have the World Blockchain Roundtable merch on there now too. If you guys want any, we can give it to you for cost or whatever. We'll figure out whatever. I think that's it. Anyone with WBRT lot can get that merch at cost. You just have to ping us, right? So let's see here. Make sure you share this episode, because the more it gets viewed, the more all of us who participated in making this episode will get. That includes the people who got questions on air, including the last one. Thanks, Sean. And make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and do all the things that you're supposed to do wherever you're watching it. All right? So thanks a bunch. See you next week.
Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best.
Adaptable, raw capital, label radical yet rational. A tactical approach is palpable if this animal is fallible, but that conclusion is laughable. So with for all detachable from the mandible, you see it now.